I do recall you marrying me up in that god-forsaken land Alba," she heard a voice say close to Osrith's ear. Finan's face was close to hers, and he took her hand and led her from the aisle to the side of the church, as the true bride of the day was being prepared by the church doorway. "Not god-forsaken," she told him. "God was there, as was the Morrigan." "The Morrigan was there, was she?" Finan asked her. "You felt her presence?" "I did," Osrith agreed, and Finan drew her to him. "Then we are blessed," he told her, and laughed. "What?" Osrith asked. "It is no wonder you are having trouble putting down your sword." "I did put it down, and my Sikhs," Osrith told him. "Gone by now." Probably she thought. But Finan was smiling, and pulled her close to him. "And I picked them up." Osrith kissed him, holding his face with her hands as he held her back, and they kissed until a whistle of appreciation came from somewhere and brought them back to Tamworth's church and the marriage of Sigtryggr and Eadgith. Finan put a hand to her head. "You came down with quite a thump," he told her. "Does it hurt?" "Yes," Osrith admitted. "And it's causing you to lose vision?" Osrith nodded. It was not easy admitting weakness, even to Finan, especially to Finan. "So will you now go home and rest, for my sake?" She nodded, and he kissed her head. "Finan," someone said, and they broke apart. "When you have quite finished with your wife, there is something I need to say to her." It was Ethelstan. She stepped from Finan, who watched her walk with the Lord of Mercia around the perimeter of the church. "You have, by playing along with this plan, shown more loyalty to me than anyone I have ever known." "You truly love this land then?" "I truly do," she admitted. "Then I make you this promise," he told her, glancing to the center of the church, where the real bride was beginning her walk. "When I become king of Wessex, and Northumbria is mine, when I scourge the land north to the top of this island, when I burn it into submission, your land, Berwick, will be spared." Osrith paused for a moment, and then turned to Ethelstan. "I thank you, Lord," she replied. "So, to be clear, the burning of the land is dependent on you obtaining the crown of Wessex." And Ethelstan laughed, giving her a smile that she had only ever seen once, on Alfred's face, when he had been cornered, over Beamflout. Which is where she had met Edward, a young man, not much older than his son, standing before her, frothing with youthful excitement over a girl called Ecgwin, who he liked. "Ethelstan's mother, and is of course Osrith," he said. "You have done all I could ask for Mercia. Consider the vow of service that you gave to Ethelfert fulfilled." Then, he lowered his head to her ear, and added, "After the service, leave, and do not ever return to Mercia. Your company will escort you home." Then he turned, for his sister had reached Sigtryggr, and put a hand behind her back. "Go, be with your husband." Weddings are meant to be happy occasions. 888,888,888. Finan caught up with her in the stables. All of the men were ready to go, and if Osrith had doubted Ethelstan's meaning of the words, "after the service," she knew them now. Aldhelm had been sent to supervise their leaving, and a more straight-laced man Osrith did not know. She doubted now that he had been involved in Elfberg's rebellion, and would probably be the one to hang him, and round up any other rebels. "Osrith," he called, as she made to climb onto her horse. Aldhelm, who had been standing at close quarters, moved back as Finan approached. She handed Aldhelm the reins and nodded her thanks, as her husband spoke to her further away from the intended departees. "I'll be going home, Finan Moore. I'll have the land in order for you," she told him. "You're always leaving," he told her. This was an instruction from Ethelstan, as I know you heard, Osrith told him. A mortally clear one. She reached up and kissed his lips. "Besides, you always follow." "One day I may not," Finan told her. "I do not believe that," she replied. And he pulled her close. God, how Osrith wanted him, wanted to take him to find a room, away from everything, and just be with him. "What will you tell Constantine?" "What he will hear anyway, in due course," Osrith told her husband, looking up from his chest. "There isn't a great deal he can do about it. He can plant Christians in Northumbria, To increase his territory, Finan told him. When Osrith said nothing, he kissed her head. "You fought Sigtryggr," he added. "I didn't see anyone else helping," Osrith replied. "I fought Norse before." And when Finan stepped back and looked at her, a disbelieving expression on his face, she clarified, "Ivar the Boneless's army. When I was 12, I stood beside King himself as Prince Domnall landed the blow. I kept Norse from deferring him. I fought Norse at Doier." The battle at Doier? Finan asked, a trace of wonder in his voice. "And you made the king of the Ofuex sit up and take notice?" "Yes," Osrith said, her hair absorbing the rays of the cold evening's sun. Summer was on the wane, and then wondered what it would have been like if she had actually fought him, with Bué, if her head was not causing her so much bother. Not killed him, she told herself. For Ivar's grandson needed to marry Eadgith, Ethilstan's sister. Osrith could see how it made sense now. "My God, I love you," Finan told her, bringing his lips to hers and giving her a knee-melting kiss. "I'll come when I can." "That's if Wessex and Northumbria are not at war." Edward looked ill, she said, thinking of the glimpse she had seen of the king at the ceremony. Her old lover. How long ago that all felt now. Finan said nothing. He never did where Edward was concerned. He had hated that Osrith had had to recover from 2 abortions when he was Atheling. He hated that she had had anything to do with him at all. "It'll be Ethelstan, there can be no one else, in Wessex, when his father dies. And Northumbria will submit, in time. And my brother will break his heart again over Bibbenberg." Finan raised an eyebrow. "Ethelstan swore an oath not to invade Northumbria while Uthed lives," Finan told Osrith. "That means Uthed will have sworn one without words," she told Finan. "He will back Ethelstan to take the whole of the island of Britain." There, thought Osrith. She had said it. Her worst fear, because it meant she would have to take sides. "Did you really fight naked?" Finan asked her. "Apparently. I think some fungus must have got into the water I was brought." "Oh, that head injury." But she did not get a chance to finish what she was saying, for her husband's lips were on hers, and she could feel the warmth of her body by his. "Moelaine," Finan said, kissing Osrith. "And when you visit Alba, make sure young Finan gets to hear that I am thinking of him. You made the right choice to have him cared for in Alba. He knows my language, he knows my culture." It began there. The choice. It would really be no choice, for Osrith. And the funny thing, she thought, looking back in her mind to that day, was that Finan knew what side she would choose. "I will meet you at Berwick," he added, and kissed Osrith once more, entangled fingers in her short hair. Then, he took a step back. "One thing you can do for me, wife," he told Osrith. "Grow your hair." "Grow my hair?" Osrith thought. "Yes, I can do that." "To kill Ska tilde Pilcro LL's men," Finan nodded. "He butchered Stiora." She gave him a good fight, though. Osrith knew. "Of course." "And the children?" Finan shook his head. "Taken or dead." He shook his head. "Go on with you now, or I'll be hanged beside you." "Oh, I doubt my brother would let that happen." Osrith smiled, and she took Aldhelm's patient hand in hers for a moment as she passed, before getting on her horse and riding out of Tamworth with her mercen warriors, and her loyal young man of the Berwick estate, who was as much of a mercen as any of them. North 88,888,888. "There are men following," Eglfrith told Osrith as they passed the wall, and the Tyne River. She looked, and indeed there were 6. "My brother's men," Osrith told him, dismissively. "They guard this part of Northumbria." It did not bother Osrith that she was only part right. What did bother her was that the men were actually Uthed and his company. While she was excited about the fact her husband is approaching, it was soured knowing that Uthed was too. "We were asked by Ethelstan to ensure you left Mercia," Uthed told her. "It borders Northumbria," she told him. "Yes, but not Alba, in whose kingdom you claim Berwick to be," he replied, in what he thought was a casual manner. "So you come because you fear that if you stay away too long I will take back Bibbenberg on behalf of the Old North?" Osrith retorted. "I like Edith, perhaps I will make it hers. Or Father Oswald's." Uthed shifted in his saddle. "If you can't play nice, don't play at all," Finan said as diplomatically as he could. Osrith caught his eye. I will ride with my men, point out the weak points in your fortress, brother, Osrith told him. There are no weaknesses, Utad called back, and he held back his men, watching as Osrith rode off with hers. And when they got to the border of Bibbenberg and Berwick, he lingered at the border. You are welcome at my home, Utad, God knows you are, Finan told him, knowing that Utad had taken on this role to see Finan back to Berwick too. But not at hers, Utad told him. You are so, she likes ye, Finan told his friend. Well, I would like to see how she treats her enemies, Utad told him, and then laughed, adding, I have seen and heard. Bare asked naked. It wasn't news to him. In fact, the rumor had begun to take on a life of its own. She had shape-shifted into the form of a bear, and at the slavers, she was naked except for wolf belts. As for him, Finan had seen this before, a head injury and blackout, the person not knowing what they had done in the time they were unconscious. It had happened to his younger brother, Ray, only 7. He had fallen from the tower at their father's home, and had had headaches and fits until one day he had walked straight off the Fairhead cliffs. He would make sure that Kaltigar, the young farm worker now warrior, and deeply devoted to Osrith through her Cumbrecon, did not let her out of his sight. It'll be that head injury, Finan replied, beginning a lifetime of defending his wife to her brother. She will have eaten something, with a fungus mold, it's that time of the year. And he left Utad's side once more, and Finan caught up with Osrith, and they rode together in their lands in the beautiful sunshine. 88,888,888. 4 men were riding down from the mountains as Osrith rose to do her rounds of the farm. I will ride out to sea, Kaltigar told Osrith, who was always up before dawn, and took 3 of the farm boys, who were training to be warriors with him. Osrith climbed to the top of her hall, and watched as the 4 young men turned, 2 on either side, and shepherded the riders in, across the pack-horse bridge, and onto Osrith's farm estate. It was Constantine, and with him Eswi, young Finan and another man. Norse, by the look of what Osrith could see, and she watched them approach, musing on what this meeting was going to bring. Utad had let Eswi go, and he had ridden north immediately, so he would have had first-hand news of everything that had happened. And she had had no notice that Constantine would bring young Finan. And what of this Norseman? Come back to bed, Finan told Osrith, sleepily. Kaltigar can handle it. We have visitors, Osrith told him. Unless it's the king of Alba, come back to bed, he told her. Osrith, her face grim, climbed down the loft hatch and stood by the bed. Then she reached for her sword belt and jerkin. You are joking, Finan told her, working it out. He pulled back the covers, and Osrith got a good eyeful of the reason why she had nicknamed him more. But there was no time to follow anything like that up now. Pots and ironware were being brought into play in the kitchen, Rhea, no doubt, ordering the kitchen maids about, having learned from Kaltigar that Constantine had arrived. A reluctant Finan went to inspect the harvest store shortly after partaking in a late breakfast with the king, and his son, and the Norseman, nodding to Eswi as Constantine's spies awth them. For Constantine had come to see Osrith, and she was now walking in the orchards with him. I have 2 other guests at Dunnottar, 2 children, Constantine told her, after greeting her and asking after her health. He seemed to know about her head injury. Eswi, Osrith surmised he would have told Constantine everything. Who do you mean? Osrith asked, at a loss. Can you not guess? A boy and girl. Osrith thought, and then her mouth fell open. Then, she closed it again. Stjora's children? No, Osrith told Constantine, they died. They did not, Constantine told her, a faint smile on his face. But they would have if I had left them there. And that told Osrith what she needed to know. No spy she had been in Mercia, he had wanted her there, the interest on Sigtrygr Eadgith, so he could send men past her door and down to Eofric, to make his presence known. He had not expected Skoll Skilligrimson to be there, attacking the city in his king's absence. Egil Skilligrimson has been in my company since Angus returned with the children. Constantine told him. He is in open opposition to his brother, who you killed, he added, with a smile. Young Finan has been most intrigued by the man, a skald, who has taught him the rhyme of the provinces of Irian, and a poem that lasts all night long. Osrith laughed, thinking of her son. He will have loved that, Osrith told Constantine. And Mercia? She asked. It had to come to it. What did Constantine want to exact from her now? You did as I wanted. You exposed the rebellion, showed me where the weaknesses are, where the alliances are. He took a step to Osrith, and for a moment, she thought he was going to kiss her mouth. Instead, he moved closer and kissed her forehead, his long, black hair by her face. Osrith put her hand to his shoulder, and pulled away, gently but firmly. You have lost your pearl, I see? He told her, his hand near her hair. It was a gift, to my mercen deputy for his wife. She remembered Elfkin's surprise when she gave it to him, and his astonishment when she laughed on asking her name. It was Haf, and Osrith immediately remembered how she could have had what she suspected might have been a very passionate night with a Haf, the cook's daughter, the kitchen maid at Caeligulid. I knew a Haf once, she had told Elfkin. Her name means, summer. Summer, repeated Elfkin. I never knew that. She was born in 3 milk month, he added, so it makes sense. How do you ever speak about things? Osrith had gently chided. We don't talk much about ULT of things, Elfkin told her, and Osrith shook her head, laughing to herself. Well, if you want your marriage to last, you should think of something pretty quick. It's good you are learning Cymric. Kaltigar has taught me a lot, Elfkin had confided, although I suspect it's mostly swear words. So, Igil has not come to exact revenge over his brother's death? Osrith asked Constantine, as they walked back towards the farm's hall. Constantine smiled. Indeed not. He wishes to thank you for his brother's death. He wishes to meet your brother. Perhaps he should go with Finan, Osrith told Constantine. He is due to resume his service to Utad shortly. And Utad would not come to Beric, Constantine mused, as they reached the hall. And I will not go to Bibbenberg. I think that's a perfect arrangement. And, when she turned, at the door to the hall, she saw young Finan standing beside his father. Your husband asked especially if I could bring him. Finan wishes to train his son to be a warrior. I accepted, knowing that he would take him back to Bibbenberg. And, Osrith learned, it had all been arranged. Their son would be trained by his father and his uncle, not his mother, as Osrith had been so insistent about. Finan wishes to know if you agree to this, Constantine told her. She looked to her husband, who gave Osrith a brief nod. I agree, Osrith said, quickly. Could anything be more perfect? Well, there was still the land dispute, and Norse was still invading the west, and Edward still claimed Northumbria to the fourth, and Constantine claimed Pitland to the wall. And in the middle was Beric, in the center of what Osrith called Bernicia, and she was happy there, contented, to farm and to teach swordcraft, waiting, if Ethelstan's words were true, for the world to burn around them. Constantine left that evening, leaving Igil with them, to ride out the next day. Eswi was staying to help train the young warriors. Elf will be of age soon, and he will challenge Ethelstan, Osrith told Finan in bed that night. Where will you be when that happens? Finan asked. They were close, Osrith's skin next to Finan's. She leaned back and placed a hand on his chest. Here, she said. Keep safe, he told her. If there's one thing I want you to do, is to keep safe, as well as grow my hair, Osrith teased. And then they kissed, and then they touched one another, and they made vigorous, toe-curling love. And the next day, Finan and their son rode south to Bibbenberg, and war did not touch them, and Finan visited his land, and young Finan grew in body and in skill. Until the day, 4 years later, when news came that Edward of Wessex had died. Then, turmoil broke out all over the land once more. Ethelstan was claiming the Wessex throne, and too many rich lords with too many interests rose up to stand in his way. Peace could be no more.